There's something that we have to admit to ourselves as members of the Blackmagic community, and that's that we're absolutely a cult. A cult of fanboys. And we will die hard on this hill to shoot with Blackmagic and Blackmagic only. And the Sony shooters wonder why we do this to ourselves. Why do we shoot on a camera that has no autofocus and a battery life of 20 minutes and a body made of plastic? Well, you digitally over-sharpened heathens, you wouldn't understand. I don't care about anything but my 12-bit B-roll and my Gen 5 color science. We have suffered for a very long time, but it has paid off. It has paid off to be a fanboy of Blackmagic today, because they've just released the cube camera that we've all been asking for. Why is it so important? Why are all the Blackmagic fanboys dancing out in the streets over a change in the body of the camera? Well, let me show you why the box camera is such a big deal for Blackmagic users. And I will show you by explaining all the problems with the Pocket 6K. Now, for starters, whose pocket? This is huge. It is not a pocket camera, but it's not just the size of the camera, it's the weird shape of it. It's very long this way. It just makes it extremely awkward to balance on a gimbal, for example. It just simply doesn't fit, especially without a cage. It also feels cheap. Kind of like plastic. I don't think it is made from plastic specifically, but it feels like it. And because of that, it is light, which means that you are absolutely micro-jittering while you're shooting, with no way of actually attaching anything to it either, because it only has one little thread here as well, and one on the bottom, which is not great for a cinema camera. The battery life, it uses these LP6 batteries and lasts probably around 20 minutes. 20 minutes. You can barely do anything in that time unless you've got 7 or 8 of them with you to change while you're shooting, which is a massive inconvenience. So when you buy this camera, you actually don't pay just the cost of the camera. You pay the cost of all of the accessories that you have to buy into as well for it. And you really have to rig it out to make it work. So to fix the weight issue, you buy a cage. And so now that you added the cage, it was heavier, and it had all these mounting points on it that you can actually work with. But you had to fix the battery life. So you bought some kind of system that allows you to attach a V-lock plate. Then you bought V-lock batteries, which aren't cheap. Then you had to run cables from this into the camera. But now that you put the V-lock battery on it, you're blocking the screen. So you've got to mount a screen onto it. So we grab a top handle and a screen, and then the cables for that. Chuck a lens on it as well. There's no internal NDs, and so you stick on a matte box that you slide filters into, and you have a massive camera. And it cost you probably double the amount that you had to pay. What about the media? This was a big problem when this camera came out, because you were running 6K raw files that were extremely large and taxing on data, and you needed fast cards to be able to actually run that. You couldn't do that on your SD cards, so you wanted to get the CFast cards, but they were extremely expensive. So instead of that, most people decided to get a T5 Samsung drive to basically shoot directly to the drive. So you'd have a little drive hanging off like this here, which of course lets you shoot to like a 2 terabyte drive for a lot cheaper. It would cost you maybe £200 for 2 terabytes versus 600 for 1 terabyte. So it's like 3 times cheaper, which is great in theory, but the problem is you have all these points of failure now. If you just so much as tug on the cable by accident, it would corrupt your media. I've had to reshoot interviews because I've accidentally nudged a cable and it corrupted the file. And sometimes you don't even know that you've corrupted any files until you get home, load up your computer and just see all these black squares instead of clip previews. And that's when you know, these ones have all corrupted, which is absolutely great. And so if you're a working professional, you can't allow such a point of failure to exist because it's more expensive to redo a shoot than to buy the media for it. So you shell out an extra grand on 3 cards. 2 cards, in fact. It doesn't end there. How do you put this on a gimbal? You don't. How do you hold this for long periods of time if you're running and gunning? You would have to get yourself, I never did, and it hurt my back, but you have to get yourself one of those vests. So that's an extra grand. You see where it's going. It just keeps adding up cost-wise to work with this camera. We all kept shooting with it anyway. And it's because the image out of this camera is just absolutely beautiful. And it made me fall in love with filmmaking. For a lot of us who started using Blackmagic cameras, this was a gateway into cinematography. Before this, I was just shooting DSLR video. I was a videographer with a gimbal, pretending I know what I'm doing with the settings. And then you get something like this, where it's a camera that does not hold your hand. It is not forgiving. It taught me to think more about the composition. It taught me to really want to study rigging and lighting and all of that. And if it wasn't for this camera, I probably wouldn't have been as interested in the work that I'm doing now. So I am grateful for that. But I'm not delusional enough to realize that it's time for a change. Because I was at first, I couldn't care less about the idea of a box camera. I was like, shut up, you red wannabes, just buy a Komodo. Just shut up about the Blackmagic box camera. I mean, some guy was so obsessed, he built his own box camera. What a mad lad. But then I picked up a used Canon C200, which is what I'm shooting on now, and I understood what it felt like to actually have a camera where everything is just built in, and to be able to just pick up the camera and go and shoot instantly. But it's not a Blackmagic look, which is what I've learned to love. And that's why the box camera is so significant to the Blackmagic community. So let's discuss some of the details of what this box camera solves. And it solves a lot of these issues that you used to have to solve with rigging. This new box camera is called the Pyxis. It has the same 6K full frame sensor as the Blackmagic cinema camera, not to be confused with the pocket cinema camera, which means it shoots an open gate, which is beautiful. I mean, the image out of that camera is fantastic. So that's why I won't get into the details of it, because we've already seen what that sensor can do. But now you get it inside of a much more appealing body shape that's designed to be rigged out. The body itself is made from machined aircraft grade aluminium, which for any of you Star Wars nerds out there, it's the same material that all of these custom lightsabers are machined out of. Which is a very, very nice feeling metal. And it's solid. And it's not too heavy as well. You have loads of buttons on the side, kind of like the Ursas. I think, you know, it's great to have that feedback. That's what I loved about the C200, is all the buttons on the side. It's just real, it's physical. But you still have, obviously, the same Blackmagic OS and screen for all the easy touchscreen utility that you need. This battery problem is now solved. They tried to solve it in the past by giving you battery grips and using a different battery format. They upgraded to a Sony NPF system for the cinema camera, which just wasn't good enough. It gave you maybe an extra 20-30 minutes of battery life. Now they've switched to BPU batteries, which is actually quite similar to these Canon BPA batteries. And these last ages. They're quite easy to get, and you can get sort of really thick ones as well. They say here that it can last up to 3 hours on the larger ones, which are the U60s probably. You can still shoot to SSD if you want to. They have provided the USB port, but what makes it a little bit better is they've got custom plates on the side where you can mount that SSD, and it seems like a much better solution than dangling it off the side here like like this one, to be honest. Because this cable is just, it's so easy to snag. But if you look at the pictures of the way they've attached the SSD to the side of the box camera, it looks quite secure. But for the sort of professionals that would probably use internal media, you have CF Express dual cards. So 2 of them instead of the 1 in the cinema camera. Which is super nice. They're also hot swappable, so you can switch them out while you're filming. What's really cool about the custom side panels as well is that they not only will have different ones that you can buy to attach to the camera, so it's basically moddable. They're also going to release the files for you to be able to actually machine your own ones as well. So I imagine the Blackmagic community will come together and actually create some really cool custom plates to put on your camera. Quite excited to see what they do with that. There's also sort of mounting points all over the camera itself, so you won't need to add a cage onto it, which is great. You just buy a top handle and you're basically ready to go. So you don't need to find any mounting solutions for your batteries. And there's no loose cables for that either. It's just straight slot into the back. So they've got cloud integration, which is a really cool feature. I can imagine event videographers using this, because if they're out shooting and they can have a constant connection that uploads their files straight to an editor, they can have an editor be constantly creating content for social cuts, etc. while the event is going on. And it doesn't stop the videographer from filming, because he doesn't have to go and offload footage and come back out again. He can be constantly shooting and just constantly sending over that information through 4G or 5G, which could really change the game in how live event production companies work. It also has its own internal timecode generator and timecode sync system, so that's pretty cool. You can sync all the other cameras to that camera specifically. And then, like most of the other cameras, it has Bluetooth connectivity. But despite all these really cool features, there's a couple things that I think are really missing. It has a mini XLR port on the front of the camera. I think this kind of body style could have benefited from a full-size XLR port. It also doesn't have a HDMI port at all, which was a grave mistake in my opinion, because a lot of people do have HDMI-only viewing monitors. I think there are cases where you want to be able to use HDMI. Using external capture cards, for example, you have to invest in new kit. Some wireless receivers and transmitters don't have SDI options. So for people coming from kits that they're used to using HDMI with, it might mean a sunk cost there. And that's a bit of a shame, I think. But also just to allow it to be accessible. To say, for example, someone's made a director's monitor that is just a normal TV. They don't want to spend $2,000 on a 17-inch screen from a company. They just want to use a flat screen LCD monitor that they've picked up for like 70 quid, which is not usually what Blackmagic's ethos is, because they tend to be a company that aims all of their products to be as accessible as possible. And you can argue that this is aimed at a different group of people, but I don't think so. I think everyone who's been using the pocket cameras are going to be switching to the box camera. I think that seems to be the natural progression. I think we'll see a fizzle out of the pocket style cameras over time. It still has no autofocus at all, which I think it should be a feature. I think it's just useful to be able to have, especially in an interview setting where the person is shifting back and forth. It's just really handy to have that autofocus keep on them. It also doesn't have any global shutter, which it's not the most important thing, but for people who are looking to perhaps switch from the Red Komodo X to the Blackmagic systems, they might second guess that choice. Because for sport work, for example, or fast-paced action movements, you're still going to want to shoot with the Red Komodo X. But despite all the shortcomings of the camera, all of the features that it does have, and there are many that I didn't even mention, like live streaming to your clients off-site, for example, the camera is a very compelling offer because it only comes in at under $3,000. And yeah, that is more expensive than the previous Blackmagic camera, but it's still cheaper than a lot of the competition. And unlike the previous Blackmagic camera, you're actually spending a lot less on the accessories that you would need to run and gun with this. You don't have to spend an extra $300 on a cage. You don't have to spend another $300-400 on a V-Lock battery mounting solution. You're not dealing with any extra cables either. It'll just be one HDMI straight into the screen and that's it. And if you're coming from the cameras before the Cinema 6K, then you're actually spending a lot less on the media as well, because those CF Express Type B cards are half the cost of CFast cards, but 3 times the speed. You can buy a 512GB CF Express card for about 130 versus probably 300 that you're spending, maybe 350 that you're spending on a CFast card. So in general, when you're buying the Pyxis 6K, the real cost is a lot cheaper than the previous systems. You only need a top handle and a screen, and you're ready to shoot. And if you want to rig it out bigger, you can. It has more options for that. So you don't lose any of the versatility, you get a better form factor, it will balance on a gimbal a lot better, the media is cheaper, and so I don't see why anyone would buy the old camera systems anymore. It's a big deal that they've created this particular camera. And they should have made it a lot sooner, but I am happy that it's here with us now. And what's interesting is that you're not locked in to a particular mount anymore. You can actually choose whether you want the EF mount or you want the L mount, or for an extra $200 you can get the PL mount. So you can really have any lens option that you want on these cameras. What I must say though, and I find this very interesting compared to the marketing that they've done on their Ursa cameras, is that they don't mention interchangeable mounts at all, which potentially means that once you buy into one system, you are stuck with that mount. And I think it's strange because if you look at the pictures of the camera, you can see screws on the front where supposedly you should be able to remove that mount and put on a different one, but they don't have options to buy different mounts and they don't mention that interchangeability anywhere. So I think we'll have to wait to see. Maybe someone will find a mod for that. What's also very interesting is that with the introduction of their new 12K Cine lines that they've just also announced, there is intercompatibility between the accessories for that camera and the Pyxis 6K as well. And that, I think, is a very smart move from Blackmagic, because it means you can invest into your 6K system, buying all of the accessories for the Ursa, and then when you're ready to make that switch, when you're ready to move on to a bigger camera, all of those accessories can move with you. That's pretty incredible. So well done, Blackmagic. I'll be looking to pick one up for myself as well. So if you're looking for Pyxis content, then probably should subscribe. Yeah, let me hear your thoughts. Like, what do you think about this new camera? Were you waiting for this as well? Do you not care about it at all? Is there anything that disappoints you about it? It's interesting to see what other DPs would use it for. So yeah, I'll see you in the comments section.